Why cash is king and the emotional need behind it. You quite rightly pointed out that over the last 3 decades, nobody saw.
If we have a cash buffer in place, I think that really helps us to live a better life because we don't have to stress about money in those times. Welcome to Your Wealth Playbook. Another episode 6, the no bullshit guide to building wealth. We're going to talk a little bit around some cash buffers, but I want to share a quote, a Stoic philosophy quote. There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will, from Epictetus. And I think that ties into our episode today, great Jared, around cash buffers, because life's unpredictable. And if we don't have a cash buffer, we don't have that liquidity in place. If something happens to us personally, mightn't even be to us, it might be to a family member, might be to our extended family, or just friends that we love. It's always nice to have a little bit of cash set aside that we can help out. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately. There's been some personal things going on in my life, and having the cash buffers associated that we've built in place as a family has really allowed us to focus on helping out our family, because there has been a little bit of for lack of better words, not disaster is probably not the right word, but just some not great news to one of our family members. I'm not going to go into it, but cash is king. And you often hear it that cash is not king, cash is a poor investment. Yes, cash is a probably poor investment, but what cash can do for you in times of need, because life is unpredictable, the world is unpredictable. We've only got to look at the last 2 decades, 3 decades, around COVID, the global financial crisis, those 9/11, those events happen that no one can predict. And if we have a cash buffer in place, I think that really helps us to live a better life because we don't have to stress about money in those times.
Spot on, Kerrod. And people do say cash is king, but people also quite rightly point out that cash deflates. What we want to show you today is why a cash buffer saves marriages, how it builds wealth, and makes you a financial deal maker. Plus, we'll also dive into a wild story about debt investors beating the market.
That's a funny sort of analogy to put it, but yeah, debt investors beat the market. Yep.
Absolutely. So, like I said, cash deflates quite rightly. That is correct. But why cash is king and the emotional need behind it. Quite rightly pointed out that over the last 3 decades, nobody saw 9/11 coming. Nobody saw the GFC or what we went through over the last, 2 to 3 years with COVID from 2020, and how that affected not only markets, but people's households, people's businesses, and the risk that came associated with that. And what we saw with particularly businesses there that didn't have cash reserves is that there was a massive shutdown, especially in retail and hospitality, due to circumstances that were well outside of their control. So the biggest risk that we have a look at through businesses and households is what you can't predict and what you can't plan for. And what cash allows you to do is to be able to have funds put aside to help you get through those hard times. Have a look at retail businesses through the COVID period, and until the government stepped in and helped out, there was no cash flow whatsoever.
Gut-wrenching.
And you cannot predict how that is going to, number one, come into effect, and number two, what that's going to do to your business and your household, because quite often those two things are very much interlinked when it comes to small businesses and people that we talk to.
Small businesses, absolutely, they're linked, and the cash buffers that they provide, but it's a punch in the guts. If you don't know where your next meal's coming from, if you've got children, or you don't know how you're going to pay off your house, if you don't know if you can turn the lights on, it comes to pretty dire straits. So a cash buffer for me, it's hard to put a number on it. I like to have a hard rule of 3 months worth of expenses for the business, plus also 3 months worth of expenses for our household, working out whatever that looks like. Love to have that amount of cash there. But I heard a great quote from Morgan Housel, who is wrote the book, The Psychology of Money, cracking book. If no one's read it before, I think pick it up and read it, because it goes through happiness, wealth, and greed. It's a must read for everyone. I quite often buy it for clients, but he had in there that you need enough cash that you feel uncomfortable, that you've probably got too much. and that's probably around the right number. So that might be more than 3 months worth of expenses. Always like to have at least 3 months, both in the business and personally, because I think that can weather some decent sort of storms with the cash buffers that we build into place for myself.
Importantly, when we mentioned 3 months as well, a business that's then going to pick up and start trading again, if it has been shut for 3 months, let's talk COVID, its income is not going to be coming in on the 91st day. And that's where it's important for this is a lot of businesses have long invoicing periods and need time to get runs on the board. And that's where this comes in as very, very important is if something does shut down on one day, that income can stop rolling in from that day. Yes, there may be some invoicing that comes in after that, but to then generate business and to generate momentum in business is extremely hard, and that does take time. So that's where this comes in as so super important. It's also important to note that we talk about cash and the way it can deflate over time. There are things that we can use to combat that slightly. For a business, putting money into a business online saving account that's potentially a higher interest earning account than its normal transaction counterpart. For homeowners, putting money into offset accounts, so they're saving interest on their home loan and their non-deductible debt. Although it's not being invested, it is still, either saving the money or earning them interest. So it is still working for them as well. So it is important to note that we're not talking about just keeping money under the mattress, as your grandparents may have done.
No, don't keep cash under the mattress at home. It's important to have it in a savings account or in an offset account. I love that because, yes, you're going to save a little bit of interest. Offset account, if you do have a home loan, is going to be the best option for it. At the moment, it's 6%, so you're getting a guaranteed 6% return straight away. But if you're thinking about it from an after-tax perspective, you would have had to have earned more than that to be able to save the 6% because it's already in after-tax dollars. Or an investment, you would have to pay tax on the investment income that you've got. So therefore, you'd need a higher than a 6% return. Guaranteed 6% in the offset account is great. It helps us to, feel comfortable, but also earn a little bit of 6% on our money. We've also got, I've seen a great, and if you're watching this visually on YouTube, I apologize, but if you're listening, if you can think about a $100 note, the purchasing power of $100, which is what we're talking about when your money deflates or gets inflated away, the purchasing power of $100, if you can, it's basically like a mountain, but the downside of a mountain, your $100 note doesn't look like a $100 note anymore, especially not in 2025 with the way that inflation's gone. What you can purchase today versus what we could purchase 5 years ago, that $100 is definitely not worth $100. It doesn't go as far. You don't get as much in your groceries. You don't get as much, electricity. You don't get as much fuel as what you did. I remember fuel prices 5 years ago and back during COVID, it was about $1 a litre. Now it's $2 a litre. So it's twice as much. 6% return's not going to accumulate that back. So it's important to have the cash buffer, but it's not an investment. It's a safety net. Cash buffers save marriages.
They do. So about 3 to 6 months. For an Aussie household, would you recommend around the same when it comes to what that looks like, about 3 to 6 months worth of living costs and mortgage?
I do. 3 to 6 months. Generally, some people are just going to go, I've got a hard fix. It might be $30,000. It might be $50,000. Often I'll see clients and they'll want to come in and they'll want to start investing and they'll be saving some money. And then we'll go through what they've got. And on the liabilities, they've got a $10,000 credit card debt. And they may have that either that personally or in the business, and they're paying 18 to 22% on credit card interest. Or they've got a zip pay or an afterpay that they've had for a couple of years and they're just paying the minimum repayments on it. Before you invest, get rid of all of your personal loans is one of the biggest things. Get rid of your personal loans, build up your cash buffer. 18 to 22%, I'm not going to give you an investment that does 18 to 22% straight away, straight off the bat. I wish I could, but there's no guarantees in life. I can't do that. So you can do that when you pay off your credit card. Get rid of your personal debt. Get rid of the debt that you shouldn't have so that you can start to get ahead in life and you're not feeling like you've got your head, just above water. You're treading water. Get rid of your personal debt. And even to nearly the extent of car loans. Car loans, yes, I don't mind them. But if you've got a high rate on a car loan, have a look at it. Have a look at how you get rid of it. Have a look if you can refinance it. Have a look at different ways so that you can make sure that you've got ability to make a cash buffer so that you can start to get ahead in life. but definitely get rid of your afterpays, get rid of all of the things that you shouldn't have. Credit cards, chop them up. I don't think anyone should have a credit card, although my wife's been hassling me about getting one for the business because you can get all these Qantas points and things like this. And a lot of people do get them for the Qantas points and they do utilize them. But I would say generally, for 95% of people, if you can't manage your cash flow well, don't go and get a credit card. Because if you're trying to game the system and gain points, I think I know who is better and who has got the longer history between a bank and you around the psychology of money. It's definitely the bank. The ball's in their court. If you can beat the bank at their own game, well done. But I reckon there's probably only 1 to 2% of people who can. So therefore, if that's not you and that's not your domain, chop up your credit card, get rid of it.
I think it's important to focus on the difference between what is a cash buffer and what is having available funds. And I think for a long period of time, credit cards have been viewed when people check their net bank or their statements that, oh, look, I've still got, 10 grand. You don't have 10 grand.
That's not your
The
money.
bank has 10,000 that they will let you use and pay back at a ridiculous rate if you don't pay it off within the terms and conditions stipulated on your card. Now, is that to say that cards are bad for everybody? No, because like you quite rightly pointed out, you can use it quite effectively for budgeting, low limits, for business expenses, to earn points and things of that nature. Absolutely. For me personally, I pay off my credit card every fortnight because I budget fortnightly and I pay myself a wage fortnightly. I find that the easiest way to pay off a credit card, because if I leave it for the 30 days or the 55 days or whatever it is, I've got no idea what's gone in and out of it. And I can still measure it in line with how I measure a savings account or what's left in my account come day before payday for my main transaction account. I'll use my credit card like that. So I think with that, if you do have quite a low limit and you are budgeting it in line with how you budget your household and not seeing it as somebody else's money, then tick, you can use it. But if you are constantly in a cycle where you're maintaining the minimum payments, I'd encourage you to have a look at your credit card statement, because quite often down the bottom, banks are now required, or have been for 15 years now, but to put how long it would take you to pay off that card at the minimum repayment. And we talk about home loans being over 25, 30 years. Credit cards quite often, if you're only paying the minimum payments, can go over 100 years.
Yeah, wow. That is astonishing. I didn't know that fact.
I'll try and bring some in for the next, and I'll obviously blank everything out.
Yep.
But some of the cards that we refinance, if you pay the, $25 a month, $50 a month, whatever it is, the bare minimum, which again is not the bare minimum that a bank will assess you if you're borrowing for a mortgage. That's the bare minimum just to tick the bank's terms and conditions on that credit card that they've issued you. It can go, 80 to 100 years based on the higher limit cards and a bare minimum repayment. And the reason for that is that, like you pointed out, you're talking 20% plus, some of the cards up to 30% interest. You won't ever get on top of it by paying minimum repayments. Pay it off every fortnight, keep it at zero and work from zero, as opposed to working within the limit. Get it back to zero every single fortnight.
Even a cash buffer, you can build up a cash buffer inside a credit card. You can overpay on a credit card and have more money there. That's if you've got a $10,000 limit, you can have $11,000 on there because you've overpaid $1,000.
Yep.
I prefer you go that way than the negative way if you are using it for a point system. Couple of things, Jared. You mentioned that you manage your household you get paid fortnightly, pay off your credit card fortnightly. I think that it's important. I think fortnightly is probably the longest that I would go if you're looking to build a cash buffer, that you go through with a fine-tooth comb on where you're actually spending money. At the end of the month, it's very hard to reconcile where you've spent your money because you've forgotten about maybe the couple of beers that you bought on the first Sunday of that month, or you might have forgotten about the $50 that you put into your sports bet account, or the fuel because you had to run to Sydney and back because you had to pick up this cracking protein that you just had to have, or whatever it is.
Very different spending patterns I'm feeling here.
Yes. But if you're looking to build a cash buffer, go through your expenses with a fine-tooth comb at least weekly and see where you actually are spending your money to make sure that you've got more coming in than what's going out until you can build up that cash buffer, until 95% of us can cut up a credit card or be in front on the credit card and use it wisely. With that, I want to lead into the debt investors' secrets. This is a study that was done by Fidelity, a large US investment bank, on their clients' accounts and who were the best investors. And it actually turns out people that had lost their passwords or the deceased were actually the best investors because they didn't make any rational or fear and greed, chasing a hot stock, selling out when the market was dipping. They didn't sell out at inopportune times. They just held through, and they were the best performing accounts over a long period of time. And that probably comes also to Warren Buffett's, one of the greatest investors in our generation. He's 93 years old. He's worth $100 billion. And Warren Buffett has made 99% of his wealth after his 65th birthday. So if you're looking to retire at aged 40 because you've got enough money, your investment journey, because we are living longer and longer, you will likely get a letter from the king at age 100. You will continue to build wealth, and you should continue to invest and build wealth. The eighth wonder of the world, as Buffett, I'm a bit of a fan here if you haven't picked up, the eighth wonder of the world, compounding interest. His mate, God rest his soul, Charlie Munger, also had a great quote around compounding, that it should not be disturbed at all costs. Therefore, we need a cash buffer, because if you are starting to invest, the best way to do it is to set it up regularly. This is definitely not personal advice or financial advice. This is general advice only. But the best investors, as Fidelity have pointed out, are people who lose their passwords. Set up your investments, get your cash buffer in place, and then lose your password for the next 20 to 30 years. Check it in 20 or 30 years. Continue living your life, making sure that it doesn't disrupt what you are doing, that you live for the now, but put some money away for your future self, because that compounding effect really takes into an account. And I'll put some numbers behind it. Warren Buffett's net worth at age 65 was $3 billion. It's $100 billion now. If he does a 10% return, just an average return, 10% return now in this next year, he'll make $10 billion, which is 3 times his net worth at age 65. Now, we would have never have heard of Warren Buffett if he decided to go and play golf with his $3 billion at age 65, because like so many people in the world, he'd made a lot of money, a great investor. But why we do know Warren Buffett is because he has generated so much cash and he's worth so much money and is a great investor because of the effects of compounding. He's continued to do it well past his 65th birthday.
Wow. Does show the importance of dividend reinvestment and compounding interest there, and why you need to be able to do it by having a cash buffer in place. If the market is turbulent, or if you have a loss of a job or a global pandemic, you need to be able to do that consistently, don't you?
You do, especially when you start investing. If there is a global pandemic, if there is a global financial crisis, you want to make sure that your house is in order first, and you're not a forced seller, because generally that's not the time to be selling during a 9/11, during a global financial crisis, because you need to pay for food. You need to have a cash buffer in place so that you're not selling out at inopportune times. You never want to be a forced seller. So building that cash buffer, I know that we've spoken a lot about it, Jared. I've got some key tips personally that I use for myself when I'm building a cash buffer back up, or to make sure that I'm maintaining a cash buffer, is that I use a 40-20-20 rule. So 40% of living expenses goes to paying the electricity, going to paying the house, the home mortgage, to paying for food. 20% goes to schooling for the kids, and 20% then goes to Emily and I and holidays and things that we want to do in our life. And then the other 20% is what I invest with. So I should say 40, 20, 20, 20. There's another 20 in there. But that's before I started investing, I'm saving that money. So that additional 20% of our income is what I'm saving until I build that cash buffer. Now that I've got that 20%, I wasn't utilizing it anyway. I've set it aside, making sure that our investments continue to they're on autopilot. But if you can, and I know it's hard these days with the way that house prices are, and we'll probably dig into that in our weekly episodes around trying to fix housing and the housing market in Australia. But if you can keep your living expenses to 40% of your family's take-home wage, it puts you in a great stead to continue to live your life, because you may have kids, you may still want to have fun, you may still want to have holidays. Yes, you should go and do all those things. But 40% on our living expenses only gives us a great buffer to be able to start saving for our cash buffer to save our marriage.
And building into that, I think automation and aligning it, like we touched on, if you get paid weekly, budget weekly. If you get paid fortnightly, budget fortnightly. I find that 40%, if you can build that in and automate it, so obviously your home loan repayment or your rent would be paid fortnightly, but also annual, quarterly, monthly bills, dividing them up and paying them by BPay in line with your pay cycle, so fortnightly or weekly or monthly, whatever that looks like, is extremely powerful as well. So something that I've seen a lot of my clients do, and myself personally, your annual council rates for your house, BPay it to the council fortnightly or weekly in line with your pay cycle. That 40% is going to come out religiously every single fortnight. You're not going to get that ugly bill that comes through once a year for your home insurance, your car insurance, rego, all sorts of things like that. You can BPay anything at any sort of frequency that you want. And by doing that and building it in, that 40% is all automated and it's all gone. And there's no big scary annual or quarterly insurances, electricity, depending on the season, and your pool pump and your ducted air conditioning going nuts through summer. What the electricity bill can be without some solar, it is so much easier to do it that way. I've probably done it for the last 3 years now. I wish I did it forever.
Yeah.
It's a great way to hack your savings and to know easily what that remaining 40, 30, 50% looks like, depending on your household as well.
Why don't they teach us this in school, that we should be paying all our bills fortnightly instead of getting a large annual bill because the large annual bills are generally going to be for car insurances, car rego, home insurances. You're also going to have your rates notice that come through. If you're lucky enough to have an investment property, or 10 like Blake, you'll have 10 sorts of rate notices come through. If you can BPay them, which you can do fortnightly, phone bills, if you're getting paid fortnightly, pay them fortnightly. If you're getting paid weekly, pay them weekly. If you're getting paid monthly, pay them monthly. As soon as that money comes in, it should be going out, knowing what all your expenses are, budget for it. And I love that tip, Jared, automate it. Just to set and forget, set it up, go through it once, get it all done and dusted, and we go, yep, this is what it looks like for us. I think Scott Pape's got the great book, The Barefoot Investor, personal financing book, the bucket scenario. Just pay it all off. Get rid of it. Get all your expenses out of the way as soon as your money comes in, so that you don't think that you're rich because you've got all this spare money in place, but then and you go and spend it. And then when the car insurance does come around, there's no money for the car insurance.
Exactly right. Now, let's also link these buffers back to property, and let's link it to an earlier episode that we did with Blake. Now, a $10,000 buffer here will make you a better investor. You're not forced to sell a rental property when rates hit 6% from when you bought it at 2%. I've seen a lot of articles around news.com and some other media recently around people feeling trapped that bought when the RBA cash rate was sitting at 0.1 and how their mortgage repayments doubled. Now, this is a market cycle that you couldn't predict, and people are always going to be buying and selling property. You're never going to be able to pick the peak or the trough of a market, but by having a cash buffer associated with that and a contingency plan in place, you're going to be able to mitigate risks here. Now, you're not going to be able to stop everything, and there are still going to have to be times, especially elongated times, where you do have to make movements within markets. But for the most part, for rate variability, having money associated with a buffer in an offset account against your home loan when rates do go up is going to save you from having to sell a property. Like we saw in 2022, Blake said that income is king. Cash keeps you holding. This is so true when it comes to the type of properties that he was talking about in the episode last week. What we can do with this and have the extra money sitting aside means that if you do have a period of 3 months where there's no tenant in place, you can still hold that property. You don't have to sell if the market has taken a dip, and you can ride out and weather the storm to then compound it over a much, much longer period of time and get through to that second or third wave of the property cycle and build your investments up.
That's important. We never want to be forced sellers, having a cash buffer there in case interest rates do run on us. But, also for if you're looking to retire or you are retired, we've just gone through a 20 to 25% drop in the market, similar to COVID. GFC was about 40%. You don't want to be selling your assets, especially if you're living off your superannuation or an investment account. You don't want to be selling those assets at this time because you've just taken a 20, 25% haircut. Having a cash buffer, if you are living off your investments, that cash buffer goes out a substantial way. For me and my clients that we work with, it's a year. It's a year's worth of cash that we've got for their expenses, which could be anywhere between $60,000 and $100,000 that we've got sitting in cash at any one time. Yep, it'll earn 4 to 5 to 6% sitting in, term deposits and things like that. But they've got cash there that they don't have to sell out of their investment. So that's if you're looking to retire. Jared, you spoke through a scenario. If you've got an investment property and you're investing, cash buffers are always important. As much as people always say that cash is trash and it's not an investment, no, it's not an investment, but it can save one.
And similar to this, a lot of banks now, when we're doing pricing requests for people's home loans, will actually ask for their savings balance net at the end of a transaction. There's one big four in particular and 2 or 3 of the second tier that this forms part of their pricing request. So what that looks like is traditionally banks would want to know roughly how much somebody was borrowing in relation to the value of the property, or a loan to valuation ratio, and a loan amount. That was about it. Wind the clock back 10 years, we're looking at now a difference in pricing between investment and owner occupied properties. And then now we're looking at diving right into the loan to valuation ratio, the type of repayments, the type of loan, and also what sort of cash is going to be held after. So whether this is something that banks are introducing because they're working out how much interest is going to be paid on the loan net of offset, which is something that they do consider, or it is something they want to see how secure this loan is, this is something that needs to be looked at and considered when you're doing it. So not always is it best to put every single dollar that you've got into things, because banks as well also want to see that you've got security and you've got the ability to hold on to properties, not go into arrears, meet your repayments if things aren't going well. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
They want their money back. If they're giving you money, they want you to have the ability that you've got savings on top of your repayments, so that if interest rates do go up, if there are any unexpected expenses, that you can do. On a personal note, I remember there used to be the old adage advice that you needed to go and pay off a loan, pay off a personal loan, go and get a car loan so the bank could see that you are repaying money. When I bought my first home 13 years ago, I walked into the Commonwealth Bank, and because I had a cracking savings rate and it was very, very consistent with over the last 2 or 3 years, the lender behind the desk said, "No problem, Kerrod. We can see that you can pay off a loan because you've already been doing it for the last 2 or 3 years. We'll gift you, not gift you money. I wish they did, but we'll give you the money." And that was important for me because the old advice that I had got from my parents is you need to go and get this. And I was like, I'd like it. Why? Why do I have to have a loan and repay interest? I think that's silly. Why can't I earn interest? Why? And when I went into the bank, they were like, yep, sure, no worries. We can see that you can constantly and reliably pay back a mortgage, which is going to be well below what you're already saving. Happy to give you the money. And I got into the market at 19, which is great. But the feeling of watching your wealth grow while you sleep, knowing you're covered, that's a deal maker's dream, and cash makes that real. So cash is king because, one, it saves marriages, it stops panic, and it makes you a deal maker. If you've got the availability with cash and you can make deals that some people can't because they don't have that available cash, perfect. Build your buffer, clear your debt, and let compounding work its magic only once you get rid of all of those personal debts. If you ever need help looking into this, Jared is the budget expert, and he can run you through all things budgeting, tying it over, especially if you're looking to progress yourself and get onto the property ladder. Jared is the man to go and speak to. If you're watching this on YouTube, sorry about the rough heads. If you're listening to it, we're trying to get the audio better. If you've got any questions around budgeting, cash flow, cash buffers, how you would do it, or any tips, feel free to reach out. Thank you for listening to episode 6, and we will be back next week. I think that we are going to have an exciting guest on. A little teaser.
I think we will have a very exciting guest on. Thanks very much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great day.